Harrow. Harrow reached Low King Tanzanite's mosaic castle as Ackle breached the desert's long horizon. His mind was blank. He was unable to handle the Vahantry's atrocities he had witnessed, had allowed. I just sat there. I let them kill the soldiers. Why didn't I do something to stop them? Anything. Harrow darted straight for the refreshing water in the fountain. Satiated soon after, he sought counsel. So early in the morning, Harrow did not expect King Tanzanite to hear his concerns. An administrator received Harrow. She brought him into one of the castle's small offices. Cabinets filled the perimeter of the room with only enough space for her to scoot around a wobbly desk to sit on the far side of it. "How can I help you?" she asked, unfazed by his smell and disheveled appearance. "My name is Harrow of Fagori. I need to let the Low King know that there are people targeting soldiers off the minor roads." The administrator's mouth dropped. "You're Harrow?" "Yes," he said breathlessly. "I was with a group of civilians coming to Hisofe when a few soldiers joined us and claimed they had been attacked. Presumably, the same people returned later that night and slaughtered them in front of me. A woman with a flaming river brand on her arm held a knife to my throat." "I can't believe it. I need a moment. It's terrible this has happened. I'm having trouble grasping all of it at once." "It sounds absurd, now that I say it aloud," Harrow said. "I'm not saying that it's absurd. I believe you. I'm honored to be in your presence, to meet you." Harrow had run into some people who had had a similar reaction to meeting him when he traveled between the northern towns. He still wasn't sure how to react to the flattery. She continued, "Droves of volunteers have enlisted because of you. You've done a noble thing. You're the talk of the city." "Low King Tanzanite will hear of the news, though, right?" Harrow clarified, wanting to ensure he hadn't run through the night for nothing. "Of course, I'll alert the Low King as soon as he has risen," she said. But she kept looking at Harrow, studying his every detail. "Thank you. I would also like to join the king's army to fight the Raisaglai," Harrow said. "It would be an honor to register you. There are enlistment forms in the desk if you'd like to do so now." "As soon and as quickly as possible," he said. "I've traveled all night to share the dire news with the king, and I'm passing out from exhaustion." "Once we filled out the forms, I can show you to an available room in the barracks," she said. "Thank you." "We'll establish your first day of training the start of the day after tomorrow, so you have time to recover from your travels." "Tomorrow would be fine." Even as he said it, exhaustion crept into Harrow's mind. He constantly yawned while filling out the paperwork, but he powered through until the end. The administrator showed him to his quarters, and he promptly passed out, relieved he had taken the first step to amend his failures of protecting his family and the slain soldiers. When Harrow awoke, it was the middle of the night and he was starving. A schedule had found its way under his door, detailing where he needed to be and when. Though he could not read well, the instructions were simple enough, using shorthand symbols for the times and corresponding locations. At first sunrise, he was to report to a room starred on the itinerary's map. When he discovered the mess hall, he traced out the path to get there from the barracks. He had no idea what the protocol was to retrieve food, or even when food was available, but he would explore it nonetheless. If they weren't open, he could take the couple of coins he had left and purchase something from one of the open-air markets outside of the castle. At least a few were always staffed. He wandered back to the administrator's office, but when he arrived, he stopped. Reamer was in the office, filling out her own enlistment paperwork. His heart pounded, and he yanked himself back around the corner before either the administrator or Reamer noticed him. Realistically, he shouldn't have been surprised. But the memories he had suppressed in the new surroundings came flooding back to him. The swift motion the assassins used to murder the soldiers, the lack of expression or empathy upon their faces, the resulting carnage. For a brief moment, a wave of nausea warded off his hunger, but it abated shortly thereafter. He fled toward the mess hall, with guilt and grief likewise hollowing out his stomach. "Harrow!" Tuner, the bard that Harrow had recruited, called in the mess hall. He grasped him by the shoulder and pulled him in for a tight embrace. "Oh, thank Basil you're okay. What happened to you? We were terrified that the enemy had taken you." When we woke to find the soldiers slain, we assumed the worst. I needed to warn the Low King, Harrow said, taken by surprise at his friend's presence. I ran to tell him. Weimer sobbed this morning when she found that you had gone. She'll be relieved to know you're all right. Brett did too, but he'd kill me if he knew I told you that. Harrow grasped Tuner's arm desperately. I can't face Reamer. What are you talking about? You enlisted yourself, right? Tuner asked. As soon as I arrived. Don't be stupid. You can't avoid seeing her. You'll see her in training. Why can't you face her? He dropped his gaze. Feelings of disgrace bounded inside his brain. I ran. To escape the Vahantri, yes, I got that part. Why can't you face her because of that? Harrow wanted to correct his misunderstanding, but it was too long an explanation. Instead, he said, I left you all. I'm riddled with shame for it. I understand, brother. I'm certain the others will too. Tuner clasped him on the shoulder. You fret too much. Have you eaten? Not since our last meal together. You must be famished. Grab your rations. We'll eat together. Tuner claimed a seat at a slab of hoisted sandstone that doubled as a table. Amid the seating area filled with matching tables, he had his pick in the quiet hall. Harrow couldn't believe how Tuner had accepted the news. Even if it was only a half-truth, he assumed everyone would have turned against him. He returned to his friend with a plate full of lamb. We were terrified what it would mean for the Crusade's morale if you had fallen, Tuner said. Harrow tore through the boiled lamb leg, focused on sustenance. We all want to help you get your family back, Harrow. We want to help the spawn, protect the realm, and save the civilians, as you said. We'll do it, you know. We'll take them out together. Harrow nodded with his mouth full. He took a swig of water from a hollowed oxen horn flagon to wash everything down. You're right, we will. Even having a little something in his stomach eased his hunger pains. Sickle, their fellow farmer friend, entered the mess hall and joined them. See, Tuner, I told you he wasn't dead. Not after he wrote the message in the sand. Sickle smacked Harrow on the back. Glad to see I was right. It's good to see you too, both of you, Harrow smiled. I guess you don't have to write that requiem after all. Sickle plucked a few chickpeas from Tuner's plate without an apologetic look. You can get your own, you know. I wanted to know if I liked it or not. This batch is mushy. I hope they aren't always prepared this way, Tuner said. I see what you mean. Sickle spit out the one he ate and returned it to Tuner's plate. You can have this back. Gross. Harrow tore a strip of lamb and handed it to Sickle. The lamb's good if you want to try it. You're right, it is. I'm going to go grab some of my own. About time. Tuner still looked displeased with the chewed chickpeas sitting on his bowl's rim, isolated from the others. When I return, I'll have to get your story, Harrow. Harrow heated, knowing the half-truths he hadn't corrected would surface to damn him. To change the subject, he asked Tuner, Did you all find the city all right? Certainly. We followed your arrow. After a turn of the suns, travelers from the other roads came into view, heading the same way. Following them, we found the city. It wasn't a difficult trek, but it was harder in other ways. Harrow couldn't take the guilt any longer. He had had enough time to say the words he needed to. I apologized for not telling someone where I was going. I was too terrified to awaken anyone. I feared they would... What they did to the soldiers. To everyone else. They would have killed us all. How many of them were there? Hey, wait for me! I want to know the details! Sickle returned with a bowl of rations and a glass flagon of mulberry wine. Just because I'm not going to write a ballad doesn't mean I don't get to hear. Harrow recounted his experience of being both threatened and spared by the woman wielding the knife while the others claimed their kills. They might have waited around to ensure you didn't wake us to go after them. I think it was smart you left. Tuner transferred the disgusting chickpeas from his bowl's lip to Sickle's, using the handle of his spoon. Thank Basil. Relief washed over Harrow at his friend's acceptance of his actions. You could have written the whole situation down. It would have spared quite a bit of heartache on our end, Sickle said, frowning. I don't know many words. Even if he had scribed the entire tale, we still would have doubted whether the message came from him. Reamer would have worried that the killers wrote the bloodied words to misdirect us. Sickle conceded the point. We've got to let her and the others know as soon as possible. Let her know what? Reamer asked, arriving at the mess hall. Her mouth gaped when she registered Harrow. "You're alive!" He stood as she embraced him. She hugged him around his middle, squeezing out his breath. He returned the hug and basked in her warmth. "Reamer, he tried. "Later." They spent their first day as soldiers learning information that Harrow deemed irrelevant in their urgent time of war. The teachers taught what color combinations corresponded to which ranks, what the ranks meant, and how they were assigned. They learned the different rates that each soldier could pick if they qualified for the position. Culinary specialist, scribe, management and administration, nobility fighter, builder, logger, medic, and hunter were a few to choose from. "I don't think I could do any of those. I don't even have the option to become a nobility fighter. Mother being a spawn doesn't do anything to raise my status." Most of the first day was spent filing administrative forms. They filled out forms for their uniform size and for what to do with their bodies if they died in combat. They filled out forms for survivor benefits, known allergies, and prior visits to healing mages. They filled out dozens more. It was tedious, and more than anything, Harrow wished to skip ahead to learn how to fight Rhysagli. But then the medical evaluations commenced. Sylvain's low healing mage checked every part of their bodies: their teeth, their skin, their hair, their throats, their blood, their bones, and their eyes. A complete psychological assessment followed, which meant even more forms. Upon completion of the examinations, where they were deemed fit for service, they started a training regimen. Running increased their cardiac endurance. Standard-sized boulders served as weights to build muscle. Obstacle courses helped with agility and speed. At the end of several weeks, though, Harrow had still not learned anything about Rhysagli slaying. In that time, he had become something of a celebrity around Hisofe. Every day, he met with those he had warned in his trip across the desert, and had since enlisted into service alongside him, one of whom was a dueling instructor named Scabbard. The day before their platoon was to deploy, Reamer and Harrow received their military-grade sabers from the Sylvani armory, and Scabbard offered to teach them how to wield their new weapons in the otherwise empty training grounds. It wasn't a large area, but it was open to the sky and had a convenient potable fountain at the entrance. Diagonal mosaic tiles attached to the sandstone walls encircled images of historical Sylvani wars fought against sorcerers and Rhysagli alike. After an explanation of advanced and retreating footwork, Scabbard covered defensive techniques. "How to hold the saber may be the most important lesson I teach you. Do not hold it with a death grip, but let it rock back and forth in your hand, rolling with gravity. Control the grip with your thumb and squeeze your forefingers." Scabbard glanced between them. "Yes, Reamer, just like that." Scabbard demonstrated in front of Harrow several times. "The words make sense, but my hand won't obey." Harrow tried to loosen his hold, but he worried about losing control and having the sword fall into the armory's sandstone floor. He watched as Reamer embraced the philosophy and whipped the blade in long, arcing slashes. Scabbard moved his attention to her. "Keep your movements small and controlled. Your blade is your offense and defense. The farther your cut strays from your center, the longer you'll leave an opening for an opponent to attack a vital part of you." She nodded and readjusted her swings. Harrow still struggled to stop clutching the blade as though it were permanently fixed to his body. "Swordplay is fast and controlled because Rhysagli are fast and controlled. Their weapons are their claws, so your blade needs to feel as comfortable to handle as your fist." Harrow looked to his curved blade in desperation. "Isn't that what I'm doing? And it's not right?" Scabbard demonstrated the grip again, and when Harrow still couldn't puzzle it out, his instructor took the hilt in his hand. "The only time you want your grip this tight is if you're hitting something with the handguard of the blade. Here, let go for a moment." Harrow's knuckles ached as they relaxed. "Put your thumb on the edge." Harrow obeyed. "Wrap your little finger around the grip, then your ring. Squeeze them lightly. Keep your upper fingers loose." Again, Harrow obeyed. Scabbard let go of the sword, and it rested in Harrow's hand. "Now squeeze the upper fingers." Harrow did, and finally played with the control he had been lacking. "There you go, Harrow," Reamer encouraged. They moved on to the 5 defensive pairing positions.
You have inner, outer, and upward parries. Each defends a different part of your body from oncoming thrusts and swipes. You must be careful with these. As I mentioned earlier with Reaver, the motions should be tight. You do not want to lose control, and you do not want to give an opening to your opponent. Never defend for too long, because your opponent can ride your blade in a counterattack. If your defense is not well enough supported, they can crush your parry, which will hurt, and leave you defenseless. Now try out the motions I demonstrate. 2 turns of the suns later, as they all should have been finding their dinner provisions, Harrow and Reamer practiced all they had learned from Scabbard against each other. Harrow, cut to her inside from your right, her left. Reamer, defend with a high inward parry, then counter. Scabbard circled them, examining their forms and footwork. If you both keep practicing while you're on the road, then you'll be Ricegly slayers in a turn of the boons. I should retire for now. I have quite a few forms to fill out before second sunset. Reamer and Harrow exchanged sympathetic glances. Thank you for teaching us, they both said as Scabbard left the barren training grounds. Would you like to keep practicing? She asked Harrow. I want to spend time with Reamer, just the 2 of us, but I don't want to work any longer. I can't think of another reason to give her, though. Sure, he replied. She laughed. You don't sound excited by the idea. Why don't we take a break? We've been working all day. That'd be great. She sheathed her saber and plopped into the hard tan stone around the fountain. Harrow copied her. I'm so grateful to Scabbard for taking the time to teach us. I can't believe we didn't learn anything about killing Ricegly throughout our training, Reamer said. The previous soldiers warned us we wouldn't. Harrow cast his eyes down, self-conscious of the memory. Do you want to talk about it? Reamer, I'm so sorry I left. I didn't know what else to do. I was scared and I worried they would have killed everyone. I don't know what I would have done in your place, but I wish I had kept watch with you so we could have braved it together. She turned his chin toward her so he could see her smiling. I wouldn't want you in that sort of perilous situation. I'm here, aren't I? We're deploying tomorrow morning. That will certainly be perilous. Her gentle humor relaxed him. I'm just glad you're in surveillance and reconnaissance. I hope you'll avoid the worst of it. She shook her head. Not necessarily. I don't want to engage in unnecessary violence, but I don't want to avoid it for the sake of protecting myself. If we can save your family and all the other families without bloodshed, that would be wonderful, but I doubt it. And I intend to wield this saber to help. I'm grateful you want to help. I just worry about you. He wouldn't meet her gaze again. I worry about you too. She scooted closer. His eyes whizzed around nervously, unsure what to focus on. He felt hot, despite the cooling effects of the city's weather barrier. His heart pounded like a spooked herd of sheep. She studied him, then nudged his shoulder playfully. Do you want to find Sickle and Brett for dinner? They should be done perusing the marketplace by now. Yeah, we should, he swallowed. It'll be our last dinner in the castle, after all. Because the Sobani troops stationed in the north desperately needed reinforcements, the platoons did not wait for the Southern Crusade party to arrive. Each set out as soon as they were ready. While Harrow's platoon of 16 soldiers marched up to his decimated homeland of Fagori, he kept his hand on his saber's grip. During the day, he continuously scanned the horizon for fear of Hantry members, and during the nights, he barely slept. When he did drift off, it was because Reamer had exhausted him with their saber practice. Taking the well-lit merchant road was a solace. Harrow wouldn't have dared blink if he wore armor along the arid isle. The weather-enchanted armor was another consolation. Sun's heat didn't scald Harrow's skin as it had on his previous trips through the Wan Desert, and he could better save his water rations. With the face shield down, he was perfectly comfortable, but he liked seeing Reamer's face when they marched, so he kept it up, with only a minor discomfort of heat leaking through. As the management and administration rates, Brett and Sickle lugged a cart with their tents and other supplies from Hisafe. They complained the entire way, but Harrow thought it was in good fun. Once their platoon came into the sightline of Fagori, tents rested atop the old foundations of homes and government buildings.
Sand dusted untended fields of chickpeas and wheat, and the herds were still gone. Harrow's heart broke to see the bones of his home uprooted and missing. King Tanzanite's transportation mage had reported the town stolen, but Harrow hadn't believed it until he saw it for himself. A single goat grazed among the savannah's grasses, with a long tie of rope rooting its neck to a post. At least it's a reminder of home. It looks like it might have been one of ours. N-15, their platoon's leader, greeted Sylvain's Major General, D-12, upon the platoon's arrival.
Set up wherever.
D-12 looked over a map in the middle of the concentric circles of tents.
There's plenty of space.
Few clusters of soldiers hung around chatting in the heat, but there was plenty of room between them to set up. Harrow and his friends staked out their area near the goat, and Brett and Sickle pulled the cart around for everyone to collect their supplies. Harrow pet the goat while waiting for a tent. Up close, he recognized her. She was Theralyn, one of his mother's goats. Harrow often had to milk her as part of his daily chores. Theralyn's fur smelled faintly of pomegranates. Had she wandered off in the pomegranate bushes again when the Rhysegli took the rest of the herd? Harrow's family farm was the only one to raise the bushes, so the goat was a joyful token of his home, yet a painful reminder of what needed to be reclaimed.
"Where do you think everyone else is?"
Sickle asked. Harrow had been wondering the same, but he didn't want to voice the question.
"What do you mean, everyone else?" Reamer asked in turn. "There are only about 100 soldiers here. Where are the rest of the Sylvani regional forces?"
Sickle tossed a tent to another platoon member. A passing soldier said,
"This is it. It's just us. We're staking out Rakosov again. I'm certain the Rhysegli will attack there this time,"
D-12 announced to the small company. Of the soldiers who had not arrived with Harrow, they all looked defeated. It gave Harrow an uneasy feeling. "I've been to Rakosov. It's not a long journey. Why do they all look so sullen?"
"It's the next target along the border. We'll march after morning rations. Culinary specialists, get moving."
D-12 retreated to his tent after the proclamation. Although Harrow had wanted to be a builder rate, he had failed that portion of the written exam. He couldn't read any of the words on the page. The only section he passed was the culinary specialist rate. He had known some of the names for foods and guessed the rest. Therefore, he had to start cooking. After Harrow returned from the cart to retrieve some dried vegetables and a hearty ration of water, he assembled a breakfast stew. Reamer hadn't had anything else to do, so she built a fire for his cauldron. Harrow lit the fire and cooked the early meal. D-12 emerged from his massive tent. Peering into Harrow's cauldron, he said,
"Chop up the goat and share it between the fires."
"Theralyn!" Harrow was horrified. "But she's a dairy goat, sir. She can produce a stable stream of milk much better than her meat could feed the company."
"I don't care if her udders spill liquid silver. Butcher the goat and feed the soldiers according to your rank and rate. Don't question my orders again, Private."
"Yes, sir." With a heavy heart, Harrow unsheathed his saber and approached Theralyn. He hugged the goat's head to his stomach, and she let him. She didn't seem comfortable, but she didn't struggle. "You were always a good goat. Oh, Asio, I can't do this. She's the last piece of home that hasn't been ruined." Reamer joined him. Her forehead creased in empathy. "Do you want me to do it?"
"T-97, on with it,"
D-12 called to Harrow. Grief washed over him. "No, but thank you, Reamer." She stood aside. Harrow licked his lips as he tried to build his nerve. He brought his saber up and recalled Scabbard's lesson on offensive cuts. "I'm sorry, Theralyn." He brought the saber down and lopped off his goat's head. He tried not to blame the sword, as he tried not to blame himself. "I wouldn't if I had the choice. It must be done. This sword will do noble deeds in the future, but for now, this is what is required of it." As he would prepare the flesh of a meat goat, he went through the motions to fix Theralyn's. Harrow detached himself from what he was doing, but when the time came to eat, he tried to give his portion to Reamer.
"Eat,"
D-12 commanded over his shoulder.
"You better keep it down, too. If we run into them dirty vampires tonight, you're going to need strength." She was my family's goat, sir. Oi, what did I say about contradicting my orders? Not to. Harrow reluctantly glanced at his major general. That's right. So guess what you're in for? Harrow didn't know how to respond. A whipping. And after that, you'll eat your stew cold. We're fighting a war, boy, and you better be made of tougher stuff than this if you want to survive it.
Thick welts across Harrow's back stung worse than a shade spider bite. They made the day-long march to Rakosif a painful one, and the night after excruciating. Harrow prayed to Asiel that the welts wouldn't burst for fear of infection. He walked with a slight limp, but mostly kept pace with Reamer and Sickle in his line. Although knowing them, they might have been matching his pace instead. No talking was allowed under D12's orders, for fear they'd be overheard. In the open stretches of savannah and desert, Harrow doubted their voices would announce them before their shining bronze armor did, or D12's golden set. But Harrow would not question orders. He wouldn't need another beating to learn that lesson. Arriving in Rakosif, Harrow was grateful to see it unharmed, but any relief he felt for the sake of familiarity was soon replaced with disquiet. The village folk who Harrow had met during his trek across the northern lands met the company with suspicious glances. "Why are they looking at us like that?" Reamer asked.
Sickle and I were talking to one of the soldiers who's been here for a while, Brett said as he set up his tent at the campsite. The company keeps coming here because it's D12's hometown. He visits to have his mother feed him, not because he has evidence that Rhysegli are planning a raid.
I can't understand him wanting to protect his family. If I had a company of soldiers under my command, I would have used them to stake out Fagori just the same, Harrow said.
The difference is, Fagori was actually in trouble.
Sickle worked on setting up logs to boil water over.
D12 has claimed that Rhysegli are going to attack the town so often that the people are getting annoyed with having soldiers here, and the soldiers are tired of feeling unwelcome. While no one wants to fight a Rhysegli, it's worse to waste their time pretending to.
So, what do we usually do? Harrow asked.
Nothing. We're basically just camped somewhere else.
Sickle leaned over the pile to arrange the tinder, sticks, and logs for an optimal flame. Sorrow coursed through Harrow. Therilyn didn't have to die. We could be helping another town, and yet we can't. Why are the superiors allowing this? He's Sylvain's major general. Unless King Tanzanite or Panite or one of the higher-ranking major generals show up on the battlefield, he has the authority. Reamer drew her mouth to the side.
As I hear it, he used his cousin's connections to get the job,
Brett grumbled.
Oh, yeah? Mm-hmm. Lord Damberite lives in Shasti, a town over from here. He's in charge of the northern region of Sylvain, and I think the Lord's related to the king somehow. By extension, D12 is a blood relation to King Tanzanite.
Brett struggled to tell the story and set up the tent simultaneously.
So, the reason we're stuck with him is favoritism, Sickle said.
Isn't that how all nobles operate? They couldn't keep their wealth protected from leaking down to the rest of us if they didn't.
T68, don't let me catch you speaking poorly of our leadership again. Finish settling in, then go and see if you can find restock supplies in Rakosif.
N15 tossed him a plain cloth pouch bulging with coins.
T75, go with him. T23, if you don't have anything better to do, you might as well join them. T97 too, if you can manage it.
Harrow exchanged a smile with his friends. N15 was no nonsense, but she treated everybody fairly. She gave little concessions like sending Harrow and his friends on a mission together, and Harrow appreciated the kindness she displayed through her leadership. When he compared her methods with D12's, he realized how much he undervalued them.
See if you can find some herbs for infection while you're in town. I don't want a burst wheel to lead to T97's death.
The platoon leader gave Harrow a stern look.
I take it you understand how protocols are handled now. Please don't make me fear for the rest of your lives. This is a peculiar situation. We are working closely with our major general. Most privates do not navigate such, let's call them privileged positions.
Sickle scoffed.
You don't punish us when we tell you you're making a poor decision. I don't see why he does.
I could, but I choose not to. I don't assume to always know best, and thus I'm willing to listen and to reevaluate my position. However, when you get up that high in rank, a certain level of obedience is expected, regardless of context.
Harrow, I'm sorry you had to learn that firsthand. I tried advocating for a lesser punishment, but his decisions are unwavering. Thank you for trying. After last night, the worst of it's behind me. I'll join them to restock our food provisions and look for the herbs. No need for thanks. I am responsible for you, and I will always advocate for my platoon. I'm glad to hear that you're doing better, but I hope to see you fully recovered soon. In Rakosif, Harrow found friendlier faces after he removed his helmet. The townsfolk came up to him and celebrated his success in becoming a soldier, as he anticipated. Sickle didn't need to spend any of the ration coins from N15. The townspeople showered them with freshly baked goods, plucked fruit, and ripened vegetables. As soon as the novelty wore off, they asked him question upon question. Are the Ricegli still a threat? When will it be safe again? How long will the soldiers be here this time? Why hasn't the army done more to stop the Ricegli? When will this be over? Why has this happened to your holy mother? Harrow did the best he could to explain what he knew, but answering the questions, fit for the Major General, overwhelmed him. I don't know where they've taken my mother, but the Ricegli are still out there. We don't know when it will be over, but it will be safe once the whole of the Crusade party arrives with the other 12 regional armies. The Sylvani army is doing the best it can with the resources it has. Our company will be here for another 10 days or so. A week? What about the other towns? What if the Ricegli attack one of them? I don't know. My Major General makes the logistical decisions. I think he believes we can't catch the Ricegli, so it's better to lie in wait for them. He wants to use us as bait! I'm just speculating. I don't know that for certain. I'm going to get myself in so much trouble for opening my mouth. Grumbling grew in the crowd, and his friends looked uncomfortable. I have to change the subject. Is there an herbalist in town? No, why? I have some welts that might burst. How'd you get those? Harrow frowned as he came up with a lie. Blisters, from walking. You crossed the entire border of the Wan Desert before you enlisted, but now you have blisters after wearing enchanted armor? It's quite strange. Brooke covered. If there's not an herbalist, Harrow should rest his feet then. Thank you, everyone, for being so accommodating, and for all the supplies. Our company is grateful for them. That evening, after everything had calmed down, and the company settled into the outskirts of Rakosif, Harrow and Reamer practiced with their sabers. Harrow slashed a downward cut to her center, and she upward parried to block it. She rode his blade in a counter, but stayed her hand before it neared his head. Harrow used the chance to practice an upward parry of his own. They continued practicing the thrusts, slashes, and counterattacks that Scabbard had taught them until Ackle started to set. D12 strutted toward them. He barked, Oi, what do you think you two are doing? Reamer jumped in before Harrow could. We're practicing, sir. Who gave you permission to wield your blade outside of active combat? No one, sir, Reamer said. We wanted to learn how to use them for when we encounter the Ricegli. N15 had never minded them practicing or even suggested that it was disallowed. Perhaps this is just a new D12 rule to learn. If we're to be punished, I'll have her lashings. Harrow stepped forward to position himself between her and the Major General. Sheath your blade, son. Never point a weapon at a superior. You'll take all the lashings for that mistake, and for unsheathing it in the first place without permission. Reamer piped a gasp. Harrow looked to his blade in confusion. It dangled in his arm, pointed at the ground. It didn't even face D12. Sorry, N15. I guess I didn't learn my lesson the first time around. Let me take his. He already has welts. They'll burst if hit again, Reamer said. Reamer, no! Don't worry, lass. He'll take the lashes on his stomach this time. By Harrow's recovery from his second round of welts, the army had been in Rakosif for an entire week. Without anything to do around the campsite besides exercising and preparing meals, his new wounds hadn't hurt him as much, though they were tender. N15 shook her head at him during his subsequent flogging, but never discussed the subject. Though he hadn't presented it as a punishment, D12 had sent Reamer on her first surveillance mission to her home village of Crusade the night he had caught them dueling. Harrow had missed her, and he was thankful she had been sent in favor of a whipping. He was also glad she didn't have to watch him recover. During his first recuperation, she'd winced every time he had, and he preferred her to not see his pain. Basil, I thank you to eternity and back for sparing her.
but she was scheduled to return to them that afternoon. Harrow played with a deck of dragons with Brett and Sickle to prevent themselves from worrying unnecessarily about the terrors that could have befallen Remer in the desert, but their game ended without her arrival. They requested permission to enter the town, and they spent some time browsing the wares. Woven baskets, wooden trays, hanging bags, and large bowls filled the market streets with bright orange, red, and yellow produce. A few of the stands were little more than multi-tiered carts, overflowing with goods. Fabric swatches and blankets draped over a series of thin ropes, strung into display racks. Rows of metallic lanterns and long white candles lined back tables with ruffled-edged serving platters and matching dish sets covering stall backdrops. It was a temporary distraction and over too soon. Harrow started and finished cooking his platoon's rations. A full turn of the suns later, as Hinook dipped below the edge of the world, Harrow detected Remer approaching on the horizon. "She's back!" He dropped the kindling he had been toying with, and he ran over to her with a full water skin. He caught up and embraced her. "We were so worried!" "Worried about what?" She hugged him back and buried her face in his shoulder. "Vahantry, Rhysagli, heat exhaustion? I didn't even want to think about it. You're safe, and that's all that matters." "It's good to see you're safe, too. I was concerned you'd earned yourself another beating." She jerked out of the hug. "I'm not hurting you, am I?" "No, I'm fine." He smiled and handed off the water. "No more punishments. For now." She pushed him playfully as they headed back to the camp. "Hopefully forever." After Remer reported her findings to D12, and most of the company had retired for the evening, she asked Harrow, "Come on a walk with me?" He reclined on his elbows. "We should get N15's permission to leave after dusk." "I've already asked her." "Perfect." He took her outstretched hand and pulled himself to his feet. "I wonder what she wants to talk about. How was Crusade? Did you get a chance to see your family?" "No, I didn't think it right while I was working." "What did you end up doing then?" He tilted his head in confusion. "I looked around for anything out of place. Peculiar tracks in the sand, odd gashes in the grain, anything that might indicate a Rhysagli was staking out the town." Instead of walking through the streets of Recasif, as Harrow had expected, Remer led him far away from camp in a large circle around town. "You make a good surveillance and reconnaissance rate. I wouldn't know the first sign to look for." Harrow glanced around the empty desert to emphasize his point. "It's all about the imagination." She turned to face him and walked backward for a heartbeat before turning back. "If you can imagine what a Rhysagli might do, where they might survey the town, how they might hide, it becomes a lot easier to look for evidence of their presence. Despite how everyone refers to them, they're smart creatures." "I know what she means. I've heard the degrading terms vampires and leeches tossed around the company more than I ever did in Fagori." "Are we going to look for signs out here?" "I had a different idea for our walk." "What's that?" "When we get to the other side of town, do you want to practice with the sabers again?" Harrow could feel the whip throbbing against his back all over again. I don't know if it's a good idea. I can't imagine what the sentence would be for disobeying orders when the whip was for being ignorant of them." "I understand. Thank you for offering to take my punishment, but you shouldn't have done that. I can take responsibility for my actions." Remer heaved a sigh. "But I dread what's to come. We'll never be prepared if we can't practice. When I was out by myself, I tried the maneuvers the best I could, but I wasn't learning to respond to an opponent's attacks, which is going to be the more critical component." "According to Scabbard, the most important part was to handle the blade properly." He joked. He wasn't ready to answer her request yet. "I'm serious. We can get a false sense of security out here where everything feels normal and we have the protection of the entire company with us. When I was out in the desert by myself, I was terrified of being seen, being hunted, and if either the Vahantry or the Rhysagli found me, I would have had to fight them using whatever skills I had at the time. I wouldn't have backup. I can't rely on anyone else during those kinds of missions. It will just be me and the saber." Harrow sucked in a deep breath. "She's right. We should be practicing, all of us. But if I can improve her chances of returning to us in one piece, I'll take the lashes." "Okay." "Really?" She jumped in excitement. "Let's get farther away from the town. I think our clanging might carry. We'll just do a short practice tonight to see how it goes. Maybe tomorrow we can do a longer session if you don't have another mission." Far into the wheat fields, they faced each other, prepared to duel. First moon high yielded little light from the catclaw crescent, but they found their stances. Their attacks started slow and easy. Slash, parry, slash, parry.
They sped their rhythm and incorporated counterattacks. Leveraging the current of the blades and the weight distribution of their opponent, each fought to gain control of the collided edges. Harrow had never felt so delighted to be breaking the rules. It had been exhilarating all the more to be doing it with Reamer. The practice was always exciting on its own, but with all the factors combined, he felt that the night signaled something more. She hadn't asked Brett or Sickle to take a walk. She had asked him. He wanted to believe he was special to her, as she was to him. On the next slash, the blade sunk into something soft. He jerked it away reflectively. She made a muffled, squealing sound. Oh no, where did I hit her? She kept making the sound. Reamer, I'm so sorry, what do I do? He couldn't see what had been hit, but he could see blood pooling in her palm and dripping down her armor's leg plates. Her sword hand clasped the bloody hand together. I need to wrap it in something. She barely squeezed out the words. Hold on. I didn't see her hand. I would have stopped short if I had. He searched through wheat leaves for long pieces he could tie around her hand as a makeshift bandage. He ripped off several and returned to her. Closer, he could better see the skin split across her palm. He wove the pieces into layers like a wicker basket around the wound. He had to cross the other direction between her ring and pinky finger, which was likely uncomfortable for her. If it staunches the bleeding, that's all I care about for now. When he finished, he asked, How is that? It still hurts, but it's better, thank you. I'm sorry again. I wouldn't have... Feelings of worthlessness and culpability caught up to Harrow as his actions fully registered. I know it was an accident. Let's just get back to camp. We don't have a medic rate in the company? Harrow couldn't believe it. As he served his first sergeant breakfast, he hated himself. N15 raised a brow. Do you need one? No, but we'll need one eventually. When we face the Reiseglide, we'll die without one. When the host of the Crusade March joins us, we'll have at least 2 healers. Possibly a third if another kingdom takes pity on our plight. So we're just supposed to bleed out until then. T97, I don't know what spurred your tantrum, but this is the situation. Perhaps the next wave of recruits will include an herbalist. I don't know what to tell you. Until you become incapacitated and need to be transferred back to Hisave, you'll just have to put up with whatever medical issues you're suffering from. Harrow shut up. He didn't need to make this an even bigger mess. Harrow, can you come check something for me? Reamer wore her standard military-grade gloves in place of the makeshift bandage. N15, may I be excused? Go ahead. It's not like we're rushing to finish breakfast to go to war. N15 sighed and took her rations to a spot overlooking the morning sunrise. What's the matter? Harrow followed Reamer back to her tent. Reamer rolled away enough of the glove to show him the lesion. Dark inflamed concentric outlines circled the wound. In the center, yellow-gray pus filled the cavity, flecked with dark flakes of dried blood. Harrow slumped his shoulders as he took in the meeting. No, he protested weakly. It's infected.